Hi, I'm Tori James from Toriska Bags, and I'm here to show you one of my favorite quick Christmas crafts, and that is the marble necklace. This is one of my favorite gifts to give to teachers at the end of the year. They are fast to make, they're cheap, they are fun for kids to get involved with. My kids love picking fabric, and depending on their age, they can even help making them. We're going to start with the most basic version with only marbles. And I'll show you what sort of fun you can have using beads. And then at the end I came up with a few new variations that I haven't tried before, from simple color blocking to some more advanced versions. So let's begin. Alright, first let's talk about supplies. You will need a strip of fabric about 3 inches wide by the width of your fabric. Now normal quilting cotton that's about 44 inches wide is not wide enough for this necklace. So you'll want fabric that is about 54 to 60 inches wide. You can piece it together, or this is some extra wide fabric that I used. This is cotton, and cotton works very well. I love this project because I can take my kids to the store and let them pick whatever fabrics they like. This is a rayon fabric. This is a silky fabric. Oh, you definitely want a woven fabric. You don't want knits. We've tried it. My kids fell in love with some knit fabrics, but they're very stretchy and it's hard to work with. And this is like a peach skin fabric. So all of these I have cut ahead of time to 3 inches wide by the width of the fabric. You can also piece together your fabric to get a longer length. I'm going to show you a couple variations later on. And for those, I did piece together some fabric. Like this. This one I pieced together with one fabric in the center and some lace on the ends, but we'll talk about that later. So you've got your fabric, and the next most important thing is the marbles. I bought these marbles at Walmart. I've also bought them at the dollar store. You can buy them on Amazon. All you need is cheap marbles that kids use for marble games. And an optional supply are beads. These are beads I bought at my local craft store. And you notice they have a wider hole. You'll want that for this project. This one's about 8 or 9 millimeters wide. This one's a little less, but as long as you can take your fabric and fold it up very small and fit it through the bead, then you can use a bead on your fabric. Some fabrics won't work very well with that though. All right, and that's all you need to begin. All right, I'm going to show you how to proceed with this cotton fabric. Cotton is the easiest to work with. It's not as fiddly as some of these other fabrics. So I'm going to fold it in half lengthwise. And pin it. All up and down the length. And as I get close to the end, you're going to want to leave a gap open for turning. So I'm going to leave my gap, it's about 4 inches wide, and I either mark it with a pen or I use two pins, and that reminds me to keep that open. And then from here to the end, I am going to curve this a little bit with my scissors. Okay, now I'm going to repeat that all along the other end. And I'm going to do that exact same thing. We're going to have a turning hole at both ends, because we don't just use that hole to turn the fabric tube, but we also use that to insert the marbles. And because I want these ends to end up looking the same, I'm going to place my fabric on top of it at this end and cut this the same. I am now ready to sew. Okay, let's sew the fabric tube. I'm going to start at one of the ends and sew from my double pin mark to the end, and then flip it around and sew the other way. Oh, the seam allowance is 1/4 inch or 6 millimeters, and I'm going to make sure to back stitch when I first start sewing. Okay. Trim that, and I'm also going to trim the seam just a little bit there at the end to make that seam narrower, so when I turn it I can get a crisper point. And now I'm going to move all of this fabric back here and start sewing on the other end of my turning hole, which should be about 4 inches wide. I like to trim off my tails now so I don't forget later. I'm approaching the other end, so I need to make sure I give myself a turning hole on this end too. Oops, I've got to reach my double pins. And back stitch. And then back stitch at the beginning of that final seam. Just trim this just a little bit. All right, it is now time to turn this entire tube. If you have some sort of tube turner, that can make it a little faster. I just have my fingers, so I will probably speed up this video because this takes a while. I usually will do a bunch of necklaces at once and then just watch a TV show or something while I turn them, or give some of them to my husband to turn. Also, if you have something like this tool for making crisp points, you'll want to use that on these ends. This is the only part that I don't love about this project, because generally my kids will have their main teacher, but then they might have a second teacher, and then sometimes they want to give it to the paraprofessional as well, and at that point we're just making a dozen necklaces and it's a lot of tubes to turn. Okay, so that's about as crisp as I'm going to get this end, and we will be ironing them. And now we just start pulling and keep going. Once you reach your other turning hole, you're very close to the end of turning. Okay, now I'm all done turning this. Our next step will be ironing. Okay, we will now iron. You don't have to iron this. It works without ironing, but I like to have a nice crisp finish at the end, and this just helps. My ironing board is really dirty, so I covered it up with a pressing cloth. Also, when you're ironing, you'll make sure that you turn in your seam allowance at these turning holes. And that'll make it easier to sew those at the end. And at this end, I also turn in the raw edges. And we are ready to put in our marbles. Okay. I have turned all of my fabrics and ironed them. And I am ready to start putting in the marbles. So I'm going to start off with my cotton unicorn fabric. This one I'm only going to use marbles in. The other ones I'm going to show you some options with beads. But I'm going to find the center of my tube, and just to help myself along, I'm going to put a pin in there so I know where the end is, or so I know where the middle is. Okay, so I'm going to find one of my holes and pick a marble and move it down my tube till I get to the center. This will help me remember where the center is. All right, so now I need to make a knot while still holding this marble in the center. This is the trickiest knot you'll do because it needs to, you need to keep that marble from moving around. You'll want to make the knot as tight and small as possible. Okay, I'm going to have to take this out so I don't hurt myself. So I'm pulling from both sides to make this knot small. Okay. Then I'm going to repeat on the other side. Cotton is actually one of the thicker fabrics to work with. I really like working with rayon so that my knots are a lot smaller than my marbles. But with the cotton, the knots and the marbles are not too different in thickness. Okay, so I actually am going to go ahead and put this pin back there, because once you start adding marbles, sometimes you forget where the middle is. So I'm going to add one into each edge to help me not forget, but the pin is also a helpful indicator. While this is a fun project to include kids in, I find that they have a hard time making these knots even and small. So I usually do this part. I let them pick what they want to do, and then I tie the knots. But for my kids who are getting a little older, my daughter's almost a teenager, and I bet she could do this year. Actually, I keep poking myself, so I'm just going to have to remember that this purple one is the middle one. I'm going to keep adding marbles. You're going to want to ultimately have an odd number. So I am now up to 5. All right, 5. Now I'm going to make that up to 7. These marbles are a little bigger than others. I like getting the dollar store ones because they're in the next to the glass pebbles, and that's where I find them, at least in my dollar store, and they're all the same color and the same size. These ones are not as uniform. All right. If you periodically hold it up to yourself and see if you like the length, that would be good. Remember to give yourself room to tie a knot. I think this one needs 2 more. This was my longest fabric that I'm using today. It's about 64 inches. So it'll be a longer necklace, unless I want to keep adding marbles, and then it'll just get shorter and shorter. I generally don't use very many marbles and beads on the fabric that's around 54 inches, just because I don't like short necklaces. I like them dangly and long. I don't have any babies anymore. My youngest is 3. But this was a great necklace to wear when he was little, because he could just hold on to it, drool on it. And could not break it like some of my other necklaces. And I have one that's red that I made at a church activity, and every time I wear it, I get compliments. People like it. Now, the more uniform you can get your knots, the better. It's a little harder with this cotton fabric. Okay. So, we are almost done with this one. The last step is to close your seam. Now you can either sew this with a sewing machine, or you can hand stitch it closed. I'm going to do that in a moment, but now I'm going to show you how I do the final knot. So that's how I tie it and how I give it as a gift. And it's long enough you can just slip it over your head, or if someone wants to make it shorter, they can. but that's the finished necklace. All right, now I'm going to show you how to have some fun with beads. Okay, so I grabbed 2 of each of these colors that I had. I think I'm going to do this next. It's very easy to fit beads in this. Let's see, I've got some bigger marbles. I wonder if I can fit them in here or if they're just too big. I think this is just too big. Yep. Okay. Oh, I forgot an important part. Well, actually, you don't have to mark the center when you drop it down. Then you can work it down to the center like this. Oops. Okay, let me try that again. All right. So I'm going to hold it here in place and tie my knot. I like to have one in the center. You can also have a bead in the center if you'd like. But I generally start with a marble in the center because once I've tied the knot on either side, it's just a nice, easy starting point. See that knot? It's a lot smaller. I like that. Of course, this fabric is just a little see-through. I can see the marble shining through it. Okay. So there's my center. I am going to add 2 more marbles and then I'm going to add a bead on each side. Oops. So a marble over here and a marble right here. Notice I just keep pushing the marble towards the knot I've already made and trying to just continuously push this knot towards the new knot towards the marble so that there's not extra space. Okay, I've got 3 marbles and I think I am going to add these small wooden beads. Now this is already a little pointy at the tip, so I'm just gonna roll it up as small as I can. The inside of these beads are unfinished, so they tend to catch the fabric. Okay. Okay, I don't need to put a knot on the other side of this, but I'm going to because I put a knot on the first side. It kind of fits over the knots, but it helps keep it the same spacing as the marbles. But if you want to skip a knot and use the bead as a spacer between marbles and just not do knots, then you can also do that. Oops. There. Okay, and I'm going to do one more marble on each side. And I think that'll be enough for this. As long as you add a marble or bead on each side at the same time, you won't mess up and forget which is the center bead. Or sorry, center marble. I have done that and it is frustrating to go back and try to figure out which one was supposed to be the center. Oops. And this one I'm going to actually loosen it up. You can see that there's just too much room right here. So I'm going to loosen my fabric and then tighten up this knot. There. All right. Let's see, I'm going to hold it up to me. I'm not sure whether I want to have one more marble on these or not, but for now I'm going to call it good. And the tops do need to be stitched, but for now I'm just tying a little knot. Right, I am going to do something a little differently for the pink. I'm going to do one orange bead in the middle instead of a marble. Oof, this pulls on the fabric. Oops, sorry, let me get on the screen. Okay, so I am centering this. And then instead of tying a knot, go ahead and put a marble on each end. See how I like how that looks. And if I don't, I can always take it right out. I think I like that. And I'm going to continue this with yellow instead of making knots. I am just experimenting right now and seeing what I like. That's the fun part of this. Now, if you want a lighter necklace, you don't want the weight of marbles, you can get large beads and use large beads inside. But I like the heaviness of the marbles. It sits very nicely. Okay. Now I'm going to add more marbles on each side. Since I'm not tying knots in it, I can put more beads and marbles. I'm just going to go ahead and keep going on with this theme. These are slightly larger beads. Oh, maybe they're not. Okay, I'm going to add a marble on each side and then a knot, and I'm going to call this one good. Oops. As I'm pulling this, I'm hearing pulling too hard on the seam. Something's didn't sound right. Okay. All right. It's my third. And I don't think it's necessary to do the fourth. I'm not going to do anything else too exciting. So these are my 3 marble and bead necklaces. And they're all done, ready to go. So now that I've showed you how to make the standard necklace with marbles only and then add a little variety by adding beads, I wanted to show you some other options that I came up with as variations that you could do with these necklaces. The simplest is color blocking. This started off as a 10-inch strip of purple and 2 10-inch strips of this raspberry silk. These are all different colors of Dupioni silk. And then the light pink, each of these strips were 15 inches. And I sewed them together at the short ends and then just followed the other directions for the normal necklaces. And I really like this look. It's very easy to do. For this one, I also did color blocking. I combined this non-stretch lace with champagne color Dupioni silk. And I had a length of this silk that was 24 inches long. That's the longest I could do. So that I cut this 3 inches by 24 inches. And these lace bits were each 3 inches by 18 inches. And I sewed them together at the short ends. And then I just made my necklace. So I really like how this one looks. And finally, this one was kind of fun, a little bit of a reach. So I only cut this one as 30 inches and I put as many marbles as I could until I reached the opening, at which point I sewed it up and then I did a little loop and tied a knot right here, right next to the last marble. And I make chains for my purse business, so I had extra chains on hand and I just looped it around and it makes kind of a fun necklace. So as hopefully your imagination is running wild and you can come up with some of your own variations, and I hope you had a lot of fun making your marble necklace. Thank you for sewing these marble necklaces with me today. I hope you had fun. My daughters are already fighting over who gets which ones. You can go to my website, toriska.com, and use the code Sewing Summit for a discount on all of my sewing patterns. I hope you have a great rest of the year and a Merry Christmas.